focus of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
News! Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Danny Garcia had this to say. He says, my legacy will be incomplete without winning a title at 154 pounds. Portion of the article reads, it was always part of Garcia's plan to compete at the 154-pound limit, which could happen once he fights twice more within the welterweight division. Garcia explained his desire to move up 7 more pounds during the most recent episode of the PBC podcast. I want to become a champion in the 3rd division, Garcia said to co-hosts Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal. And I feel that was always my goal.
It was?
To win a belt at 140, 147, and 154. And those were my goals in the boxing world. So I feel like until I win a title at 154, then my legacy's not complete. As far as me, my goals. I feel like I have 2 more big fights left this weight class at 147. You know, either Manny Pacquiao or Errol Spence. And then I feel like I want a rematch with Keith Thurman or Sean Porter. Get that victory. And then I feel like there's nothing else for me to do at 147. Because those are all the fights that people want to see me fight.
What people?
Who's asking to see a Keith Thurman rematch? Who's asking to see a Sean Porter rematch?
Not me!
Me neither. What's this kid talking about? Anyway, he went on to say, and I faced everyone at 147 already. So I feel like a new journey could be at 154. Except Danny didn't face everybody at 147 already.
Nope.
He didn't face Terrence Crawford, did he?
Nope.
And he doesn't seem to have any plans to. Better still, he was quoted as saying, I want to win another world title, said Garcia, who is also a former WBA, WBC 140-pound champion. I feel like I need another big win at 147, and then I want to win a title at 154. I feel like my legacy will be complete after that.
Oh, really?
Except, newsflash, Danny has no big wins at 147 pounds. Oh, it might seem crazy. It might sound crazy, I know. But Danny Garcia has no big wins at 147 pounds. And he's been there for roughly 6 years. 6 years and 10 professional fights. But as it stands, Danny only beat the kind of guys that he was supposed to be able to beat at 147. A good number of those guys really weren't even 147 pounders. As far as big wins go, Danny hasn't had a big win in years, let alone at 147. Best and brightest fighters that he's fought at 147 pounds are the fighters that beat him.
Keith and Sean.
I mean, you tell me, which one of Danny's last 10 fights, which have all been welterweight contests, which one of those wins was a big win?
Yeah.
What, his victory over Rod the God, Lightning Rod Salka? The incomparable Rod Salka, was that a big win?
Was it?
The Lamont Peterson fight that many people don't even think Danny won, is that supposed to be a big win? I mean, even if you feel that Danny did enough to get the decision, even if you scored it in favor of Danny, that's still not a big win.
Nope.
Lamont Peterson, what's his biggest win? Or what was his biggest win at 147 pounds up until that point? What would make that a big win? By the time that Danny fought Lamont Peterson, Lamont had already gotten stopped in 3 rounds by Lucas Mathise, 2013. And before that, he'd already gotten beaten by Tim Bradley. Tim Bradley, who gave Lamont his first professional loss, 2009. So, assuming you even scored it for Danny Garcia, I don't know if you did or didn't, but assuming that you did, even if you did, the fuck makes Lamont Peterson a big win at 147 pounds? Samuel Vargas. Does somebody want to tell me what Samuel Vargas did anywhere that he should be considered a big win for Danny Garcia?
Not a big win.
That guy was a nobody, and that fight, that was a keep busy fight. What, Paulie Malignaggi?
Huh?
Paulie Malignaggi, was that a big win?
Huh?
What was the state of Paulie Malignaggi at the time that he fought Danny Garcia? You want to know what the state of that guy was? He was coming off a TKO stoppage loss to Sean Porter, the fight right before that. That's the Paulie that Danny fought. That was the state of Paulie at the time he fought Danny. He was coming right off a loss. Is that a big win?
No, not really.
So you tell me. What's Danny Garcia's biggest win? 147 pounds. What's his biggest win in recent memory? Because it seems to me like he's been living off that Amir Khan and Lucas Mathise fight. He's been living off that for a very long fucking time now. And at 147, he doesn't actually have any big wins. What big wins? What? The ghost of Robert Guerrero? They were calling him a shot fighter at the time he fought Danny Garcia.
For a vacant title, no less.
Danny Garcia may have become a champion at 147 pounds, but he didn't actually beat a champion to be a champion. So I'll ask again, what is Danny Garcia's biggest win at this weight? What, Adrian Granados? A guy who spent a good chunk of his career, bulk of it, fighting below 147 pounds? Your best win at 147 is a guy who doesn't even normally campaign at 147? Or is it the decision win over the unstoppable Ivan Redkach? Except Ivan Redkach, he actually did get stopped. He got stopped by John Molina. He got stopped by Dejan Zlaticanin. And here's the kicker. They all stopped him below 147 pounds, whereas with Danny, he actually went the distance. Is this Danny Garcia's biggest win at 147?
He has no big wins at 147.
So he's talking about an Errol Spence fight. He's talking about Keith Diamond and Sean Porter rematches. Then he means to move up to the junior middleweight division because, at least according to Danny, he's fought everybody. Everybody but Terrence Crawford. He didn't even say that guy's name. He didn't mention him with good reason. He knows like I know, like you know. Terrence Crawford had beat this kid from pillar to post. That's why he has to convince himself that he's fought everybody. Thus, it's now time to move up. To move up having not fought Terrence Crawford, having not settled their beef that goes all the way back to the amateur ranks when they were 1-1 with each other. A fight in the pros would be the proverbial tiebreaker. Danny has no interest in breaking the tie. He's happy to move on, having not settled the score with Terrence Crawford. Who's surprised?
I'm not!
Yeah, me neither. But Danny's talking about a move to junior middleweight, and that's the real story here. That's the real news here, that Danny Garcia, who has no big wins at 147 pounds, thinks he's cut out to campaign at 154. And not just campaign there, but win a title there. So my question is, who exactly is Danny Garcia going to win a title from? You can't put away Ivan Redkach. That was your very last fight. You couldn't put that guy away. So you're going to go up to 154 and beat a who? A Jamel Charlo?
Huh?
A Jason Rosario? Who are you going to win a title from?
Huh?
The winner of Patrick Teixeira versus Brian Castano?
Either one of them motherfuckers will beat the shit out of Danny.
I'm not convinced that Danny Garcia can hold his own against an Erickson Lubin or a Julian Williams, much less the guys holding belts. And you're not going to convince me of that because Danny Garcia, the bane of Danny Garcia these last few years, the bane has been that he doesn't do enough, you know? Danny's got his virtues as a welterweight, some. You know, he's got a good chin, good-sized punch, decent counter-punching, but he's got slow feet, he's got slow hands. He doesn't have the athleticism to work around a bigger fighter's size, his stature. Danny would be a sitting duck in the junior middleweight division. You didn't do enough to win a decision against Keith Diamond. You didn't do enough to win a decision against Sean Porter, but at 154, what, up there? There you're gonna do enough?
Yeah, right.
Danny Garcia at junior middleweight against Jamal Charlo, or Jason Rosario, or even a Brian Castano. Danny against any one of them would look a lot like Mikey Garcia looked against Errol Spence. Best thing you can do up there is shell up and try to hang on, try to survive. Might not even be able to get off any punches because every time you open up, you're that much closer to being put down. You had a good chin at 140, you had a good chin at 147. But at 154, the buck would stop there because Danny would be fish food at 154 pounds. I don't know what he's thinking. Is this supposed to be ambition, or is this supposed to be an escape plan, an escape route to escape from what other fighters might want to fight him at 147? Is that what this is? I don't know. But what I can tell you is that Danny ain't cut out for junior middleweight. I can tell you that because Danny's really not the biggest of welterweights.
He's not.
You know that Virgil Ortiz, this kid, he's actually got bigger dimensions as a welterweight than Danny does. This is a guy who, down the line, could have a future at junior middleweight, but Danny,
Forget about it.
you ain't got the size, you ain't got the athleticism, you ain't got the speed. Danny Garcia's best bet of winning a world title at 154 pounds is if no one is holding it. That's his only chance. If most every single title in the division were to go vacant, then maybe he's got a shot. But right now, there's a world champion for every world title that is out there, and I don't see Danny Garcia beating any of those guys. So Danny can tell himself that he's fought everyone at 147 pounds, but we all know that he hasn't. And he can have plans to go to the junior middleweight division, try to procure a world title, but we all know that it's not looking good, and in all likelihood, it won't happen. He can convince himself of whatever he has to convince himself of. The bottom line is that Danny, he barely did anything of note in the welterweight division, and he'd be a fish out of water in the super welterweight division. Moving on, Gary Russel had this to say. He says, Lomachenko shouldn't be pound for pound number one. He got a gift against me. I don't think Lomachenko should be pound for pound. Russell told AB Boxing News during an interview posted to its YouTube channel on Saturday. If I don't think Lomachenko should be pound for pound, it doesn't matter if he beat Lomachenko or not. He shouldn't be pound for pound neither. Lomachenko shouldn't be pound for pound. I don't think he's a pound for pound fighter. Vasily Lomachenko knows he got a gift. He don't have the hand speed that I have, you know? Have the boxing ability, the ring generalship and IQ that I got. He got a little seasoning, but he, overall, really can't fuck with me. He got a gift. He fought a dehydrated version, the lowest possible version of Mr. Gary Russell Jr., you know? And it was a split decision fight, and he got the nod. And it was a knockdown in the fight, but it wasn't even called. You know? So, I mean, that's neither here or there. But I plan to move up to 135. He's at 135. I definitely would like that fight again, you know? Fully hydrated. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, so now he was dehydrated, huh?
Russell, a 2008 U.S. Olympian, has long attributed his performance against Lomachenko to his struggles making weight in the days leading up to that fight. I feel like I'm one of the best things out there, Russell said. I don't think no one can compete against me, you know? I had one hiccup in my career because I was young, you know? I was young and I wasn't as smart as I am now. You know, if I was as smart as I am now, when I fought Vasily Lomachenko, I wouldn't have cut the weight. You know, I had to lose 5.5 pounds as the weigh-in approached.
That's your fucking problem.
I wouldn't have cut the weight the way that I did in the sauna and all that other stuff. I wouldn't have cut the weight. I would have just let them find me. I would have beat that ass and I just wouldn't have got the title, you know? Like Orlando Salido did, you know? But I wasn't educated enough, you know? At the time to be able to think to do that. But it is what it is. I'm interested in seeing Teofimo and Lomachenko fight, Russell said. I'm definitely interested in seeing that fight. I don't even care who wins. I want Lomachenko anyway. He can lose. It wouldn't matter. I want Lomachenko, man. Look. I need to do it for myself, and I feel like it was a fluke. You gotta do it again to prove it to me. Prove it to me. Make me a believer, because I don't believe that shit. Tell him to come and get it. And in truth, it doesn't matter if Gary Russell believes it or doesn't believe it. It doesn't matter if Gary Russell accepts it or doesn't accept it.
Nope.
The fact of the matter is, Vasily Lomachenko, who at that time only had 2 professional fights. Just 2.
2.
1 win and 1 loss. A loss he was coming right off of. Bear in mind, Lomachenko only had 2 fights as a pro, and he was coming off a loss before he fought Gary Russell. Gary, who had a professional record of 24 wins and no losses. He was 24-0 at the time to Vasily Lomachenko, who was 1-1. Only 2 professional contests, coming off a loss.
Right.
And he was able to go the distance with you. You and your 24 fights, 24 victories. And you're telling me that he needs to convince you, that he needs to make you a believer. Here's what I believe. I believe that Gary Russell is bitter. I believe that Gary Russell is bitter because a lot of things haven't happened for him. I mean, he hasn't lost a fight since he fought Vasily Lomachenko, granted, but in the realm of big marquee fights, big marquee events, for Gary Russell, nothing's happened, and in many ways, it's his own fault.
It is.
Ain't nobody telling Gary Russell to fight only once a year, to have been fighting once a year for the past 5 years, going on 6 now. Nobody told him to do that shit. He did that shit. He did it to himself. So now all he can do is revisit the Vasily Lomachenko fight. Vasily Lomachenko lost. All he can do is revisit that to try to become relevant again, to try to get talked about, because as we all know, 135 is a more talked about, more hot weight class than 126. 126, where Gary has been
His whole career
for years. And that in and of itself makes Gary Russell's explanation for having lost to Vasily Lomachenko that much more idiotic. You're fighting a guy who's only had 2 professional fights. The one before he fought you is a fight that he lost, right? So this guy ain't even got anywhere near as much pro experience as you do. And to top it all off, you, a career featherweight, are saying that you were dehydrated the night of the fight.
Yeah.
That's what costed you the fight. You struggled to make the weight.
You've been making it ever since.
If it's so fucking hard to make the weight, you tell me, why has Gary Russell been a career featherweight his whole career? Because it's so fucking hard to make featherweight, right? That's what costed you the Lomachenko fight. Yet after the Lomachenko fight...
Did you move up?
You know, because it's so fucking hard for Gary to make featherweight. It costed him the Lomachenko fight, according to Gary. Did he move up?
No.
No, he didn't. You know what Gary did? His very next fight? I'll tell you what he did. He made the fucking weight. And he made the weight 8 times. 8 times over the course of 6 years after having lost to Russel Lomachenko. So perhaps making weight really wasn't Gary's problem. Perhaps his problem was that Russel Lomachenko was just the better man the night of the fight. And Gary can't accept that, but Gary doesn't have to. It's still the truth. I mean, what's Gary Russell trying to convince people of? That he was too big to make the weight for Russel Lomachenko 6 years ago, but he wasn't too big to make it thereafter 8 times?
In the last 6 years.
Yeah, good luck selling that bridge. And what is Gary Russell saying? That if he would have had the wisdom then that he has now, what he would have resorted to would have been deliberately missing the contracted weight. What the fuck? I mean, like, is he saying this so that we'll feel sorry for him? Is this supposed to be the precedence for a rematch at 135? Is that what this is supposed to be? Because I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to find a whole lot of people that are going to sympathize with this stuff once they realize you weren't too big to make featherweight. You've been making featherweight for years. What you're making now are excuses. And you're making excuses because, you know, I think Gary Russell's a good fighter. I do. And he is entertaining to watch. But the truth of it is, I'm a hardcore boxing fan. I don't represent the average guy that tunes into a boxing match. Whereas the average guy that tunes into a boxing match is not checking for Gary Russell Jr. The truth is that Gary Russell's schedule of sparse activity has backfired. Nobody checks for him. Nobody cares about him. I mean, Leo Santa Cruz didn't care enough to fight him, right? Gary has become irrelevant in spite of being a champion. So all he can do to get talked about again is to talk about someone else. Someone who already beat him. And he won't find much sympathy from anyone in doing this. That's the truth. That all you're doing by doing this is coming off as bitter and lacking a lot of character.